Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today our Brunch and Learn on Invoice Capture and its role in a broader AP automation framework. We're going to give it about a minute or so before we kick off formally. So thank you again for everybody who's joining us today. A little bit longer and we'll go ahead and get started and talk to you about some new capabilities that Microsoft's been releasing. You all got your brunch or lunch or breakfast, depending on where you are, ready to go. Right. So we're at about 101. So we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody again for joining. We're going to be talking specifically today about some of the latest capabilities Microsoft's released related to AP automation, and that specifically is going to be invoice capture. A couple housekeeping notes here. So we do encourage questions. So you will see in your On24 platform a variety of different panels. The presentation is beginning right now. Hopefully you all are following. So if you've got any questions, it looks like we already got some folks who know that we do have a question panel. I'm going to be monitoring it throughout the course of my presentation today. If you have a question, I think because what we can do is we can always address it at the time or maybe at the end. Feel free to go ahead and chat your question whenever you happen to have that question. If for some reason, hopefully, we'll be addressing it as we go through the presentation. We'll just circle back and make sure that we addressed it at the end. Also note that there's a closed captioning capability as well. So in the bottom right corner of your media player screen, there's a CC button if you're interested in viewing the text associated with this presentation. And you'll be able to increase or resize all of the different screens you have on the media player to fit your specific purposes. It's a pretty neat ability, and this is going to be recorded and sent out later as well. So with that said, I'll go ahead and quickly introduce myself. My name is Corey Bakhtiari. I am the Director of Programs and Products. One of my responsibilities here at Argano is as it relates to proving out new technologies or capabilities within the Microsoft technology stack. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. And what we're going to be focusing on today is specifically the capability Microsoft has generally availably released about a couple months ago. Preview came out in fall of 2022, and that's invoice capture. So what we're going to go ahead and do is provide you a solution overview, talk a little bit about some of the challenges associated with AP that lead in business to go down the path of AP automation and automating the scanning of invoices, which is the core capability of invoice capture. We'll go into the demonstration. So there will be about anywhere from a 15 to 20-minute demonstration today where we'll go through the configuration as well as the end user process. So that's like going to be the AP clerk invoicing process. We'll circle back and wrap up with a quick review of the capabilities as well as the solution, and have a dedicated section at the end of the day, at the end of this meeting for questions. Right. So when we talk about AP automation, we could be talking about a lot of different components. This is meant to demonstrate in general what the different processes or steps or components are within the AP automation space. Now, what we're going to be focusing on today, and everything here, before I talk about that, well, everything here is going to be a Microsoft out-of-box solution or first-party solution, right? We're not going to be highlighting any third-party add-ons or any customizations or any development necessarily that we may have done. There might be some configs that we've done, but really this is as out of the box as we can get. And really one of the things that AP automation is meant to address is to relieve those time-consuming and manual repetitive work or activities from the AP process, or really to make it more scalable to be able to process more. This, at the end of the day, should be allowing individuals within the AP teams to do more strategic and value-oriented functions, including analysis and enforcing of controls, for example, around spend. But at the end of the day, this does not mean that AP team members will not be involved in key components like corrections, error handling, routing for approvals, exception management, for example, as it relates to matching policies. By leveraging the Microsoft stack, you'll be using a tier 1 system and its investment or its associated investment horizon. Now, the specific piece here that's going to be new, or relatively new, is the one at the top left. That's invoice capture. The invoice capture piece has a continuous improvement model that leverages optical character recognition and form processing using Microsoft's Power Platform capability AI Builder to scan invoices into your Dynamics 365 finance system. You can even do your coding within the invoice capture capability. You will, provided you are a Dynamics 365 finance customer, you will be able to leverage invoice capture to help improve productivity in that key invoice entry activity or key invoice entry task, hopefully leading to less time spent on some of those more time-consuming and tedious components. Now, one thing to note here is that the solution has two components, two applications we're going to be looking at. There's your Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain, or F&O, for core AP processes. So that's everything from the prepayment tile or cell all the way to invoice payment. That's not changed. That's still core Dynamics 365 finance capabilities. Now you have an additional component, and that's the Power Platform-based capability for invoice capture. That's that one on the top left. This is the one that's leveraging OCR and forms processing to scan images or PDFs of invoices, and then put that into the 365. The Power Platform is the Microsoft's low-code technology solution. It includes things like Power Apps. We're going to be looking at a model-driven app, Power Automate for process automation, Dataverse, which is where data is stored, and AI Builder. So the key thing too here is that the Power Platform also allows you to extend these capabilities pretty quickly because it is a low-code solution. You're going to be able to configure the Power Platform capabilities to maybe add an approval or do some things like that without necessarily the same amount of effort or rigor that it might take you to do a customization in Dynamics 365 Finance. So key point here is that, as I mentioned, the Power Platform is the technology that enables the invoice capture component, of which we'll dig into more detail. Now, some of the AP challenges, and you're probably familiar with this if you're in this space, is that it can be cumbersome manual effort associated with entering invoices, or just processing invoices in general. But data entry can also be error prone. And so by leveraging an automated capability to capture or scan data and enter it, and just require human interaction as it relates to review and core AP processes, you're able to reduce your time and therefore cost. If you've got a high volume of invoices with unclear priorities, different due dates and payment terms, managing all of this individually, separately, is a challenge. Centralizing this is going to present some nice efficiencies, especially when you're trying to focus on implementing those things like enforcing spend controls through corrections and approvals. You're going to have visibility for auditing with audit logs either on the Dataverse or in D365 Finance and Operations. Change tracking is important as well. You can continue to segregate your functions as that can be difficult without standardized systems and processes. Oftentimes, AP automation implementations introduce third parties and or a separate layer of systems and vendors, adding complexity and increasing the time it is to realize value. This solution, again, this is a Microsoft first-party solution. This is something that also Argano has experience with implementing. We've done proof of concepts, and we're in a variety of engagements where this is on the roadmap. By relying also on disparate parties and systems without interoperability and uncertain future investment can present a risk, especially at the rapid change of technology today. You're probably familiar with the fact that Microsoft is one of the leading innovators in the space of just investments and new technologies, for example, around AI. It's fair to say that Microsoft's going to continue to do these sorts of investments to help expand their portfolio capabilities. So one other thing I'll mention here is that partnerships are going to be a key to success. So oftentimes solutions look great, they're going to demo great, but implementations is where the rubber meets the road. Having a partner like Argano that is familiar with your business and has the ability to flex to different engagement models improves the chance of success. You've got a variety of different ways of deploying what we're about to show you today, from proof of concept to full-blown implementation to just doing further demos. We're here to help you down this path towards leveraging new capabilities. The new capabilities of invoice capture. So you can think of invoice capture as sort of a SaaS accelerator that can be made to fit for your specific purpose. You'll see below a set of the flow associated with the invoice capture capabilities. Since you're probably already using Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, you should also know that you, as a customer, are entitled to the solution without any additional user licensing costs, right? So if you have D365 Finance licenses or D365 Finance and Supply Chain licenses, you are entitled to this. There's no additional user license cost. There could be potentially, based on how many invoices you will be scanning and storing, there could be additional storage costs. So we're happy to have that conversation with you on a case or on a customer by customer basis, but no additional cost outside of some additional storage and the effort to implement this capability. Essentially, invoice capture can extract data from a variety of different channels. So you've got Outlook, different types of file storage as well. One of the most common examples of use cases here that I see is that if you have an AP inbox or mailbox where invoices get sent to, that could be one of those ingestion channels from which Power Automate and AI Builder will be able to take invoices, scan them, and then push them into the Dataverse and into the Power App. So a variety of different channels, Microsoft-based technology primarily. So SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange, or Outlook. It's a modern user interface. So if you think about what that means, basically it's a side-by-side view of the scanned image and its system's data, with the ability to actually view where on the scanned image that data is coming from. So you can also train the OCR or the AI model to be more effective by your interaction with the data in the system. So the side-to-side view allows you to see the scanned image and then also maintain the system data. While maintaining that system data, that feedback will be provided back to the AI model, and then will learn based on that interaction so that the next time there's less touches, less human interaction touches. It's seamlessly integrated into D365 using an API. So basically, as far as how that setup is concerned, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to install a couple solutions from Power Platform, set up an Azure app registration, add the service into D365, Azure service into D365 Finance, and that's pretty much it. And then you need to do some config, which we'll talk a little bit in the demonstration about. Since it's powered by the Power Platform, as I mentioned, so specific capabilities are AI Builder and Azure Form Processing. to leverage the optical character recognition service. So that's the OCR piece that's going to scan the data, identify the text, specify where that text should land in the system. You can also extend the out-of-the-box model that does the scanning, or you can replace that with your own custom AI model. Of course, your custom AI model will require training efforts, but it does learn pretty quickly. But I would say though, in the course of our using this and proving this out, the out-of-the-box one is quite robust in terms of its ability to scan correctly and put all the data in its right locations. Additionally, you've got the ability to apply intelligent and flexible business rules. So for example, mapping activities. If let's say we don't have certain legal entities or vendors set up within Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, you can actually set up some business rules within the Invoice Capture solution so that, again, you can decrease the number of touches and improving the accuracy of activities like automated coding of invoices. So, Esther, you had a question. I am on the Invoice Capture key capabilities slide. Hopefully, you're still following along. Now, what we're going to go ahead and do is go through a demonstration. Now, I'm going to start with some of the configuration. You'll notice that again, there's the main component we're going to be focusing on today, which is the Invoice Capture piece, right? That's the Power Platform-based capability. And then what we'll show you is how it lands within D365 Finance and Operations. Again, it's a real-time integration. Great, thank you, Esther. And it's quite robust in terms of its ability to deploy these capabilities. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and hop into the demo.
Let's go through maybe some setup first. You've got a couple areas, system preference. That's just some preference information. You've got your different channels that you can ingest from. Again, you can use SharePoint, you can use Outlook, you can do OneDrive. You set them up here. You can specify the email address associated with the specific intake, and you can specify with a specific user or a specific mailbox. You can also tie this to a SharePoint channel. SharePoint channels are pretty neat. So what's interesting is it's not actually telling us which one it is, but you can actually point it to specific SharePoint channels as well. And remember, OneDrive is the same backend technology as SharePoint. So this is the channels where you maintain those channels. You can turn them on, turn them off. You can have multiple channels really effectively. That's the key thing here. Then you have filters. Filters are basically, okay, now let's say like we get email sent to inbox, right? Now, how are we going to filter this? Now you can filter it according to name, so content within, for example, the file name within the subject, or at the file type level, right? So primarily when we're looking at invoices, we're not getting docs, right? Docx's. We're getting more or less either pictures of invoices or like the PDF versions of invoices. Following that, you've got, this is more setup, but really what's interesting here is that you've also got the ability to map your legal entities into this Dataverse environment. So one key need here is like with some other things, there's a construct in F&O that don't really exist necessarily the same way in the common data model, right? So you need to install solutions like the virtual entities and some other ones perhaps, so that the Dataverse tables can accommodate the D365 Finance and Operations data. You can sync these legal entities. You just did this once. You could probably do this on batch. You've also got vendors here, right? This is pretty important, again, because we want to make sure that we've got, there are some validations that are done in the Power Platform Dataverse environment. And so some of those validations require this information, right? Like, hey, what are the legal entities? What are the vendors in those legal entities? Because we want to make sure that once it gets pushed into Dynamics 365 Finance, we're not going to have any issues in finance. Most of the validation will happen before it lands there, so that by the time it gets into the D365, you know that, I mean, it just needs to go through the AP process, but at least you know that the data has checked out at some level. The other thing is that, let's say, for example, you don't have all your legal entities in F&O, right? Let's say you don't have all your vendors in F&O. You don't have all your items or your expense types in F&O. If you want to set up mapping activities, so for example, maybe if you see a name, right, map it to a specific legal entity, right? So we do this for demo purposes. When we see a specific name, just map it to this legal entity. This is where you would do that. So you'd be able to set up your mapping rules for entities, vendors, items, and expense types here as well, right? This is useful for demo purposes, so we can say, hey, we can adjust, the items or expense types that are more unique to your specific customer, but we're not going to necessarily create them in D365. So let's just map them to, what we have from a Contoso demo data set. Next, we're going to go back to the main process page, right? So we talked a little bit about the config. Now we'll talk about, the more kind of end user experience. The end user experience, like many things, you're going to start with some dashboarding and finish with some dashboarding capabilities, right? These are just pre-packaged dashboards. You can extend, you can create your own dashboards. Again, this is Power Platform. You got the ability to do these things. Couple cool things though is like, hey, you want to go inspect this data, you can go and inspect this data. You can select, hey, I've got these 3 invoices that have been captured. They're not in review. They haven't completed review. So maybe these are the ones I want to focus on, right? And then you can see the specific invoice there. Again, you can see also some information about, hey, what are the number of vendors, what are the incomplete invoices, invoices with exceptions, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit. But you got this dashboarding capability that you can extend and create your own. Now, the next thing I'll show you is your received file. So this is the first place where files land, right? So before they become captured invoices, they land in the Dataverse as a received file, and then they get scanned, right? They get processed for extracting data, right? The information within the invoice. Now, before we go take a look at that though, what you're gonna see here is there's some pretty new capabilities, and the one I'll show you here is, we test, we play around, we do a bunch of stuff, and this is where typically your duplicate detection would take place, right? So again, this is part of the AI Builder capability to basically scan the data, and then it basically tracks to see, hey, invoice number, vendor, and maybe some other criteria associated with what could be considered a duplicate invoice. And then it identifies, hey, does this look like a duplicate invoice or not? In this case, it does. That said, you can always push it. You don't have to just accept the system's acknowledgement, and it's definitely a good thing to know. It's a big thing that does come up. Okay, now we're gonna hop into our invoice capture. Now, you see here a lot of different invoices that have been captured. Obviously, this is a list page. Just what I'll call out specifically is that you've got your different types of invoices, right? You've got your cost invoice and your PO invoice. These classifications, for the most part, are automatically done based on the scanning of the invoice. So let's go ahead and hop into one specifically. So this is going to be a PO invoice. And this is, when I said the kind of side-by-side modern interface, this is what I meant by that, right? So you've got your scanned image here. It's a little pixelated, right? This is of interest, and this is a note, and this impacts the confidence level or the resolution associated with scanning the data. more noise or less clear resolution can present issues or in terms of confidence with respect to the scanning of the data and the automatic entry. But it, you know, for the most part, it looks pretty good. If you want to go ahead and classify is specifically associated with which entity, vendor account, an invoice type we're looking at. We've already classified it, but you know, you can see that here. And then you've got some capabilities as well, so you can void or cancel an invoice. You can start a review process. You're not going to be able to make changes until you start that review process. You can subsequently route it for approval. This is an extension that we have done specifically for like a line of business approval, right? Before it goes into Dynamics 365. Once it's done, you can transfer it as well. Let's go ahead and start this review. All right, so what's going to do is now going to open this up. For editing, it's going to hopefully bring up, yeah, exactly. It's going to bring this up. And what you're going to see here is that you got a series of messages, right? You've got three types of messages. You got an informational, you got a warning, and you got an error message. A lot of what you're going to be seeing here, at least from an informational and warning perspective, is confidence score attribution. So you can configure how or what level of confidence score is associated with a specific message. And basically the confidence score will change. That's part of the AI Builder model. So that's not necessarily something that we can configure unless we build it out ourselves. That confidence score is something that is associated with how positive the system AI Builder form processing capability is with the values that it scanned and put into the system. So we'll take a couple look here. So we see that for the vendor address, it's a confidence score of 0.85, or you can think of it like as 85%, right? And you know, you can choose to ignore it. As you're interacting with this, it's actually going to be passing this feedback into the AI Builder model. Now, a couple cool things here too is that you see this icon. It's going to actually allow you to click on this, and it's going to navigate to the location on the scanned image where that is. Now, the one thing that's not capable of doing this is, let's say like, hey, I want to point now to a specific area within the invoice, and I want to suggest that it scans this data and points it to that. That's not there right now. So, you know, as far as overriding where you think it should be getting this data from in the image, that's not there. But I mean, frankly, it's not extremely necessary at this point. It looks, it's quite solid in terms of how much it was able to gather. One point I will mention is that there is a validation done as well. That happens during processing, happens during derive and check. And so derive and check, basically, this is like rescanning the invoice, recapturing the data based on previous interactions, right? So it's like a rerun of the data scanning. So there is a validation against purchase order, right? Make sure it's a valid purchase order, at least the number in the system with the vendor and the entity. So that's a specific one, right? Again, for PO-based invoice. So what does this mean? Is that if you got a PO invoice, you can't process it until you've got a purchase order confirmed. Now, you shouldn't be doing that anyway, right, in the system, but that is something that sometimes we need to look at when it comes to customer processes. And then you've got your invoice line, right? So, you know, charges would usually also show up under here, but you've got this information as well here. You got your item number, you know, you got your unit of measure. It looks like you see that it's a little, it looks like an EA, but it could be something else. And then a purchase line number, right? So effectively what you would be doing from here on out, this is more of a pass through. And the thing is you can also automate this, right? So let's say that you got, you know, no errors, right? It won't allow you to process anything unless you resolve errors. Warnings are okay. I'll show you an example of an error coming up. But you can set this up automatically, so you can just do a pass through. So I'm going to say I'm just, you know, complete review, but if there are no errors, you can actually just set up an automate flow so that it goes ahead and it just automatically does this. Now, is that the right choice? Maybe after using the system for some time, you might want to look at automating this even point, right, within AP automation. But for now, we don't have that set up. Okay, now that that's been done, we built in like some capabilities to route for approval. You can now transfer this invoice. I'm going to go ahead and now transfer this invoice. What's going to happen is it's going to be pushing this into D365 F&O. If for any reason there are errors, it's not going to push it to F&O, and it's going to land back here, and it's going to hopefully provide you a contextual, error notification so that you will be able to then resolve that here within the system again before it goes into Dynamics 365. All right, so we've got a cost invoice here. Again, got you classify, complete, review. So it's in review right now. We see it's going to go and say, let's go take a look at our errors here. So the error is associated with the due date, right? The due date. Yeah, that's not a high resolution. It's not great. We can go ahead and ignore it. And the other thing I'll mention is that you can also override it, right? You can just override it. So here, I'm just going to override it, or just like any of these other fields, you can override it as well. So only once it's in the review process, though. But if I'm going to leave it the same, I'm going to ignore it. See, for example, this one, it didn't capture an item number, right? And then again, what you can do here is like, it looks like maybe, for example, in this specific case, maybe we only have certain items. This is, again, an error that needs to be surfaced that you need to go back and probably correct either in the synchronization of the data, or maybe for some reason this got misclassified, right? Once this gets done, again, you resolve the error. It's going to say, okay, this is a user override, manually updated one. This can also apply to expense types. Then you go ahead and you can complete the review, or you can rerun a derive and check, right? Again, this is going to rescan it, and then you can push it out. All right, so now that we've done this and we can see the invoice has been transferred, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the way that this gets transferred is through an API. And what I'll mention is that the way that we've deployed this and the way that it's recommended that we deploy this is we deploy the Invoice Capture solution, the Power Platform solution, onto the D365's Power Platform companion environment, right? Apparently, you can do this in just another Dataverse environment, right? But Dynamics 365 allows you, the D365 Finance allows you to have the capability to deploy a companion environment that's more tightly coupled or integrated with the F&O database, right? So we've got this deployed to that companion environment. This can integrate with other ones. There's more setup involved with doing it the other way, right? So here we've got the invoice that we just processed, and now you can go ahead and click on it. You can take a look at it in D365 F&O. And effectively what's going to happen here is you just take it just like any other, in this case, pending vendor invoice. Now, this is the way that it currently lands. So cost invoices and PO invoices both land in pending vendor invoices. Not yet is the capability there to push this to invoice journals, like a cost invoice to invoice journals. Microsoft has said that we're looking at probably around a end of year. Well, actually, originally they said it was going to be part of the GA in May, but then that slipped, and then they said it was probably going to be second half of this year. But Microsoft, when they do their road mapping for their release cycles, they really only map it 6 months at a time. So I haven't seen it in the roadmap, but I have read that they're committed to getting that capability in there. How they're going to do it, I'm not sure. Maybe that's part of the classification component here, right? And then here again, so once you're in F&O, you've got your invoice again. So you can see that here, and then you can do your matching. You can do your workflow processing. then you can do your payment just like it was with D365, right? So when we look just like out of box or whatever capability that exists within D365, if that's been extended or customized. So, but another thing here is that when you look at AP automation capabilities in general, right, and we're not just looking at the invoice scanning, right? There's a whole bunch of other bells and whistles that come within the core AP process that may not exist, some don't exist within core D365 capabilities. So that's something to keep in mind when we're having this conversation, right? No real additional capabilities were deployed as a part of Invoice Capture to the core D365 F&O, right? That might bridge gaps between F&O or D365 Finance and other third-party ISVs.
So, moving forward, I do want to mention that I see we've got a question, Esther. Yeah, just like was mentioned, they do land into the pending vendor invoices queue. You can match multiple POs to a single invoice. You would have to have that at invoice line level. You would have to associate a single PO at the invoice header. That's just the way that it currently is built out. I'm sure Microsoft will be deploying additional capabilities. Yes, also the review process does capture date and time. Certainly, so like there will be an audit trail associated with that. And yes, you can attach additional documents either in the Dataverse automatically if you want to do that by building that in Power Automate Flow, or you can do it manually in the Dataverse, or you can do it manually in D365 Finance and Supply Chain. Hopefully that addresses your questions. On this side of it, I just do want to mention that there is still an honoring of security as it relates to these processes. So just like you have in finance and other platforms, you have the administrator role, right? This is going to be your role that does a lot of the setup. You have also an AI maker role. This is really more applicable for those circumstances in which you're going to be creating your own custom AI model. Again, the out-of-box one works quite well. Then you have your AP roles, right? These are really almost very similar, if not the same. These are the same as your Dynamics 365 AP roles, right? You got your AP clerk role. This is typically your invoicing role, right? So this is scan, coding, updating, correcting of the invoices. Then you got your manager role, which is more for setup, reporting, as well as the reviewing and approval. And then lastly, you've got your payments clerk. This is your transactional role that actually goes into the AP payment journal and processes that. That's a core D365 capability. Yes, I'm on, we're on slide 10 now. All right, so security can be honored throughout the application as well, so that if you have any segregation you need to implement, you can still accommodate those requirements in our platform. Now, what I wanted to just kind of really quickly just re-mention here is while most of the demonstration was primarily on invoice capture, right? Where we talked about the scanning and we showed you the coding process, the review process. The D365 finance capabilities are maintained, right? So some of the complexities that you may seek, or other AP automation vendors may have around line level matching with more sophisticated policies around tolerances and thresholds and partial, POs, partial matchings and things like that. Those are still some things that, will need to be built out by Microsoft within core D365 Finance. And those are still some areas in which maybe D365 has some room to grow. But the biggest missing piece when it's come to the AP automation conversation within Dynamics has been in the capturing, or basically the ability to have a prepackaged solution for the invoice capture scanning. So uh, while we know we're on a one version sort of cadence, Microsoft's continuing to update. I would be surprised if Microsoft does not begin to fill these other gaps. So at the end of the day here, if this is something that you're looking at long-term viability with respect to, this is definitely a very long-term viable solution, provided you don't have any immediate needs around sophisticated matching policies. So hopefully that is, so I'll address that next turn a little bit. All right, so just one thing I'll also restate here, but we've run this and we've talked and worked with Microsoft, and really when it comes down to this, you can support tens of thousands of invoices per month with this solution. It's quite astounding, with a combination of both PO-based and cost invoices. Really, at the end of the day, with the automation capabilities and the continuous learning components, you're going to be able to reduce the manual, error-prone, and tedious efforts associated with entering and processing invoices, so that you can do more analytical, higher value sort of activities like enforcing controls. There is a great amount of visibility either within the Dataverse or within D365 Finance and Supply Chain. You've got your pre-configured segregated security roles. Because this is a first-party solution with really, frankly, ready-to-go built integrations, the time to realize value here, as far as it relates to financial cycle time, is very short, because it's a simpler implementation and support, because it's all native integrations from a Microsoft built accelerator, and leveraging our experience with you can help you really deploy something like this quickly. And yes, as I mentioned, it is a long-term viable solution. So like you probably are familiar, Microsoft continues to invest in AI capabilities, right? So like AI Builder, performance processing, Azure Cognitive Services, that's going to be a continued expanding capability set that Microsoft's going to build more functionality into, or just make more robust, or make more prepackaged, because it's Power Platform with D365 F&O. This is also going to be a solution that supports a variety of different long-term solutions, because eventually Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations will also land in the Dataverse or the Power Platform environment. I use Dataverse and Power Platform environment in this case interchangeably. The Dataverse is basically, that's just the data base associated with the Power Platform solutions, primarily. You can do simple enhancements. So like, because this is on the Power Platform, you've got the ability to use and or leverage other technologies like Office 365, right? So for approvals, if you want to set up line of business approvals within the invoice capture piece, you know, you can send notifications on Teams, you can send notification on Outlook, so people don't have to go into D365 to do their approvals, with a variety of different reporting, analytics, and dashboarding, and a unified common data model. You can easily build queries and advanced visualizations. You can take advantage of your existing investment as well. That's kind of the key thing here. Like a lot of our Brunch and Learns, when we do these sort of educational sessions, you're going to take advantage of what you've already done. You're going to be able to grow on it without having to incur any technical debt, right? Typically, when you look at that ISV route, you will be experiencing potentially some technical debt later down the line. You know, we are a leader within both the Dynamics and Power Platform technology capabilities, and we can help you with any type of compliance concerns as well, for example, around SOX. So hopefully these benefits are resonating. Now, we do have some time for some questions. Let's see here. Does this API automation have intercompany cross functionality? Portion of the cost go to a separate. So if you want to accrue, or if you want to spread out the cost, if that is something that you're going to do, you wouldn't be doing that in invoice capture. if you need to spread out the cost or have a portion of the cost go to a separate entity, you would do that in the D365 finance. So if you can do that in D365 finance, you'd be able to do that leveraging this for this specific capability. Again, this capability is just that very first part of the AP automation process, that capture, scanning, and then pushing it into D365, where you can do your finance or AP processes. That's not going to change. That's one of the nice things about it, but also that's one of the things that are going to continue to be enhanced upon as Microsoft releases new capabilities as a part of their 6, 8 releases, 2 main releases per year sort of cadence. So hopefully, Esther, that answers that question. It's if you're able to do that in core D365, you'll be able to do that still using this AP automation design pattern. All right, I'm gonna see any other questions. Do appreciate the questions that have come in so far. And if not, I appreciate everybody coming on. I do just want to also mention that because you are, as D365 Finance customers, you are entitled to this solution. It's honestly the lowest or the least path of resistance, the lowest barrier to effort of deploying this is just by reaching out to your managed services contact, so your client care main contact or your account manager, and getting on a quick call with one of our subject matter experts to discuss how you can easily deploy something like this from a proof of concept perspective. Absolutely. So Esther, absolutely. So if you want to reach out, I'll go ahead and provide you our contact information. You can also send an email to Microsoft@argano.com. Microsoft@argano.com, ARGANO.com. That would be the way that you'll be able to go ahead and set up a more detailed conversation or demonstration with us, with myself or one of my colleagues. And then Ashley, you had a question about sending approval reminders through Teams. So this is a key point. So if you want to send an approval reminder through Teams, you would actually be in the solution that we have built previously, that would be before it lands into D365. So that would be the Invoice Capture Power Platform located invoice, and you'd send the approval through there. So while a user would not necessarily need a D365 license to do that approval, they will need some sort of a Power Platform license to do that approval, because that's where the approval will be registered at the end of the day. If you decide to make the approvals within D365, then yes, that user will need a D365 license of some sort. Usually, if it's just an approval, it could be like that lowest team member-based license, depending on the specific workflow type. If it's an invoice journal, I think that there's maybe a higher level license than maybe the pending vendor invoices. We'll circle back on that, but yeah, if you want to have your line of business, let's say for example, approvals done, in Teams, the easiest way for us to go ahead and do that is to have that approval be set up before it lands into Dynamics 365. And you can also do all your attachments. For example, if there's any supporting material that might be contained in the email that gets sent to the AP mailbox, you can also automate attachments to that approval process using Power Automate. So hopefully that answers that question. And then Esther, what is the support team turnaround time? Well, if you've got a support contract with our managed services team or our client care team. In that contract is an SLA associated with at the least acknowledgement and then beginning to work on any type of requests. And it does differ between what is considered to be like a problem resolution, like a break fix type of inquiry versus a more proactive advisory sort of engagement. This would typically be more proactive advisory, right? To be like potentially a mini project. So I would say though, give us probably a couple weeks lead time is the rule of thumb if we want to kick anything off, right? Provided we get all the contracts, right, in that time span. So look at that as far as lead time associated with getting something started. It's a good rule of thumb, and it's something that we do pretty much adhere to, but it's going to depend on the circumstances, right? We've got holidays coming up, which we do. It might extend that potentially. So hopefully that answers that question as well. And again, if you do have any follow-up questions and you would like more information, if you are not sure who your contact is at Argano, send an email to microsoft@argano.com, and our kind team will get you in touch with the right person. And who knows, we might be having a conversation where we're doing a deeper dive on either a technical or a functional side of invoice capture, AP automation in the near future. So I'll give it another beat to see if there are any additional questions. I hope I've answered them all. If I haven't, go ahead, re-ask it. We'll be happy to address it here, or we could take it offline. Great. Well, then that said, thank you. So also another email is info@argano.com, but the Microsoft@argano.com will get you in touch with the more directly to the Microsoft technology stack experts. So much appreciated all. Happy Thursday. Barbara Johnson, the system, and then Barbara just asked, the system be able to read multiple invoices in one email? If they are all separate documents, it is supported. If all those invoices are in a single PDF, they will show up as one invoice within the received files and captured invoices. So that's something to note. Depending on how the invoices get sent, if they're individual and or separate attachments, it's supported, but if they're all kind of like printed together in a PDF, it will show up as one invoice. But that is an example. If that is a common occurrence, that is an example of a requirement that might actually lead us down the path of maybe building out our own custom AI model to accommodate those until Microsoft builds its out-of-box one to support that specific use case. So hopefully that answers your question, Margaret. Okay, good. I think it's record. We got 15 questions. Great. Again, thank you much. And if you want to follow up, ask any further questions, you want to do light proof of concept, deployment, small project, or just ask questions over email, again, we're open to how we can engage here. We do think that this is definitely something to look forward to as far as really helping to bridge that what was a gap in the AP automation space, but is looking to be closed or bridged probably in the next year or two. So thank you much, and have a good Thursday.